Michael Bennett stepped onto the plane with the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned everything through discipline, intellect, and hard work. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase, he headed toward his first-class seat, 2A. It had been a long week of board meetings, investor calls, and last-minute negotiations in Geneva. Now, back in the U.S., he was looking forward to a moment of peace before jumping into another whirlwind week. But as he approached his assigned seat, he paused. Someone was already sitting there. A flight attendant noticed the confusion and approached. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely but with an undertone that made Michael raise an eyebrow. "Yes," he replied calmly. "My boarding pass says 2A. The woman seated in 2A, a middle-aged passenger with designer sunglasses and a smug smirk, didn't move. She looked up at him, then at the attendant. "I thought this seat was available," she said casually. "They told me I could sit here." "Maybe he's mistaken." Michael handed over his ticket without a word. The flight attendant glanced at it, hesitated for just a beat too long, then said, "Sir, would you mind taking another seat just for now? We'll sort it out after takeoff." Michael's expression didn't change. But the silence that followed was sharp. "Is there a reason I can't sit in the seat I paid for?" he asked, his voice still composed, but noticeably colder. The attendant fumbled for a response, but her words were drowned out by the sudden hush in the first-class cabin. Michael didn't argue. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side, letting other passengers board while he stood with quiet stillness in the aisle. He wasn't blocking anyone, but his presence made it impossible to ignore what had just happened. A few heads turned. A businessman glanced over his newspaper. A young woman across the aisle subtly pulled out one earbud. The energy in the cabin shifted, not chaotic, but uneasy. The flight attendant leaned closer to Michael. "Sir, please, it's just for a moment. We'll upgrade someone else or give you a voucher. It's not a big deal." Michael turned to her slowly. "It is a big deal," he said, his voice low but firm. "This isn't about convenience. It's about how things are handled, and who they're handled for." There was no anger in his tone. No raised voice. Just fact. The woman in 2A looked uncomfortable now, glancing away, adjusting her sunglasses as if they could shield her from the tension. Suddenly, another flight attendant arrived, an older man with stripes on his sleeve. "Is there an issue here?" he asked. Michael handed him the boarding pass again, without repeating himself. The new attendant looked at it, then at the woman still seated. Then he gave a tight, professional nod. "Ma'am," he said to the seated passenger, "this is Mr. Bennett's seat. I'll find you another accommodation." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her attempt at entitlement had reached its limit. As she stood up and shuffled to the back of the cabin, Michael finally sat down in 2A, adjusting his cuffs calmly, as if nothing had happened. But the silence in the cabin remained. Heavy. Thoughtful. Because everyone knew, something deeper had just played out. And what no one realized yet, was that Michael Bennett wasn't just any passenger. He was the CEO of the airline. From his seat in 2A, Michael calmly powered on his tablet. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rattled. In fact, he looked disappointed. And that was far worse. He opened an app marked Internal Systems, Exec Access, logged in with a fingerprint scan, and began reviewing the flight crew manifest. His expression didn't change, but he tapped a few names and quietly made notes. Across the aisle, the attendants whispered among themselves. The woman who had tried to claim his seat was now in the last row of business class, visibly irritated. She kept glancing forward, as if expecting someone to apologize. Michael didn't glance back once. After the rest of the passengers were settled and the plane door sealed, the captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 419 to New York. We're expecting a smooth ride and an on-time arrival." Michael barely heard it. He had already sent an internal message directly to the VP of Operations. No dramatics. No demands. Just a detailed summary of the incident, the names involved, and a line at the end that read, "This is not aligned with the standard we've built. I suggest immediate review." 5 minutes after takeoff, while the crew poured drinks and smiled as if nothing had happened, the response came in, "Understood. Already being handled. Thank you for your discretion." And just like that, the process was set in motion. By the time the plane landed, 3 people's careers would take an unexpected turn. And none of them knew it yet. The rest of the flight continued without incident, on the surface. Passengers were served, lights dimmed, and wine glasses clinked softly. But for those who had witnessed the earlier exchange, the air felt charged. Michael reclined his seat slightly and stared out the window. His mind wasn't on vengeance. He had no time for ego. But he had built his company around principles, dignity, accountability, excellence. And what happened on that jet bridge was the opposite of all 3. When the wheels touched down at JFK, a message popped up on his screen: HR and operations teams are on site. Staff will be pulled for immediate debrief. Michael didn't smile. He simply closed the app and powered down his tablet. As the plane taxied to the gate, the lead flight attendant made the usual announcements, her voice calm but clearly rehearsed. She didn't glance at Michael again. Then, something odd happened. As the cabin door opened, 3 uniformed staff members were already standing at the gate, 2 from corporate security and 1 from HR. Not for a passenger. For the crew. The lead attendant was called aside. She looked confused at first, then pale. Her fellow attendant joined her a moment later. The pilot, still in the cockpit, was also requested to step out and follow. Passengers glanced around, whispering. "What's going on?" someone asked. But Michael was already off the plane, walking through the terminal as if he'd just landed from any other trip. No fanfare, no headlines, no entourage. Just a quiet man with a purpose. Behind him, in that jet bridge, careers were being rerouted. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Behind closed doors near Gate 17, the crew sat stiffly at a long table under cold fluorescent lights. Their uniforms, just an hour ago a symbol of authority and control, now felt heavy. Across from them sat 2 corporate reps, one from human resources, the other from flight operations. Neither of them looked pleased. The lead attendant, Jennifer, tried to maintain composure. "Is this about the seating situation? I thought we resolved that in flight." The passenger didn't seem angry. The HR manager leaned forward, setting a folder on the table. "You didn't know who he was. That much is clear. But let me be blunt, Mr. Bennett wasn't just a passenger. He is the chief executive officer of this airline." Jennifer blinked. "I didn't realize." "That's part of the problem," the operations lead cut in. "It's not just who he is. It's how you handled the situation. You prioritized someone else over a confirmed first-class passenger, dismissed his boarding pass, and tried to deflect the issue rather than resolve it fairly. All while showing clear bias in your behavior." The younger attendant shifted nervously. "But we didn't mean anything by it, it's not about intent," HR replied coolly. "It's about patterns, perception, and how your decisions reflect on the company. Mr. Bennett doesn't demand special treatment. But he does expect standards to be upheld, especially for paying customers." Jennifer's voice cracked. "Are we being fired?" There was a long pause. "You're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately," HR answered. "There will be a formal review. Depending on that, next steps will be taken." Outside the room, another message was already circulating through the company's leadership Slack channel: CEO witnessed unacceptable gate-level behavior. Reinforce values training immediately across all departments. This is not optional. At that moment, Jennifer finally understood, this wasn't just a bad day. It was a company-wide wake-up call. Word traveled fast. Within hours, the airline's leadership had called an emergency meeting. Michael Bennett, back at headquarters, addressed his executive team with calm clarity. "This isn't about punishment. It's about resetting what we stand for," he said. "Every employee, at every level, must understand that respect and fairness aren't optional. They're the foundation of our brand." He paused, then continued, "We will launch mandatory training focused on empathy, customer dignity, and professional accountability. This will include frontline staff, management, and contractors." His VP of Human Resources nodded. "We're also implementing a new incident reporting system, allowing passengers and employees to flag concerns in real time. Transparency is key." The Chief Operating Officer added, "We'll review hiring practices and provide additional coaching for our gate and cabin crews. The goal is zero tolerance for anything less than excellence." Outside the conference room, social media buzzed with stories of the incident. But instead of outrage, many praised the swift action. "This CEO walks the talk," one tweet read. "This company is holding itself accountable," wrote another. Meanwhile, back on the plane, Michael's quiet response had already made an impact. The crew realized the weight of their choices and the power of professionalism. As the company moved forward, a clear message was sent, not just to employees but to the entire industry: how you treat people matters. Always. The days that followed were filled with change, not just within the airline, but across the industry. News outlets picked up the story, focusing not on scandal but on accountability and leadership. Michael Bennett became a sought-after speaker, invited to conferences and panels to discuss building corporate cultures rooted in respect. At the airline, employees began to share their own stories of difficult situations, encouraged by the new openness and support. Jennifer, the lead flight attendant, reached out to HR to express her commitment to improvement. She volunteered for the company's new ambassador program designed to mentor junior staff on customer relations. Back at headquarters, Michael received an email from a young employee in the customer service department: "Thank you for showing us how leadership looks in action. It means a lot to know respect isn't just a policy, but a promise." Michael smiled as he read it. For him, the incident on Flight 419 was never about punishment, it was about progress. Because real leadership isn't about titles or seats. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the moment. Months passed, and the airline began to show the results of its renewed focus. Customer satisfaction scores climbed steadily, reflecting not only smoother operations but a warmer, more genuine experience on every flight. Employees reported higher morale and a stronger sense of belonging. The airline's internal surveys showed a significant drop in complaints related to service attitude and fairness. Michael made it a point to personally visit airports and engage with frontline workers, listening to their challenges and ideas. His presence wasn't about checking boxes, it was a genuine effort to understand and support. One afternoon, at a busy international terminal, Michael spotted Jennifer assisting a nervous passenger. The confidence in her demeanor had grown, and the empathy in her voice was unmistakable. Later, he congratulated her quietly. "You're exactly the kind of leader this company needs." Jennifer nodded, her eyes shining. "Thank you. I'm proud to be part of this change." The incident on Flight 419 had started as a painful moment but ended as a turning point, a reminder that integrity, respect, and accountability are the true first-class experience. And for Michael Bennett and his team, that was the real journey. The ripple effect of that one flight stretched far beyond the initial incident. Michael Bennett knew that true transformation wouldn't happen overnight. It required consistent effort, visible leadership, and genuine connection with every layer of the company. Weeks after the incident, a company-wide town hall was held. Michael stood on stage before hundreds of employees, from seasoned pilots to baggage handlers, gate agents to customer service reps. He spoke openly about what had happened, not to shame anyone, but to highlight the importance of respect and accountability. He shared his vision for a workplace where every person, no matter their role or background, felt valued and empowered. "We are more than an airline," he said. "We're a community built on trust. Every interaction matters, whether it's handing a boarding pass, serving a meal, or managing operations. Our standards are high because our customers deserve nothing less." Questions followed. Some were tough. Some challenged the pace of change or raised concerns about past experiences. Michael answered each with honesty and empathy, promising continuous improvement and inviting ideas. Internally, new programs were launched: mentorship for frontline staff, leadership workshops focused on emotional intelligence, and a revised code of conduct emphasizing fairness and dignity. HR teams were trained to identify and address subtle behaviors that could undermine workplace culture before they escalated. Anonymous feedback channels became widely used, encouraging transparency without fear of retaliation. Beyond policy, the cultural shift was palpable. Employees began to recognize the power they held, not just to enforce rules, but to foster kindness and respect. Stories surfaced: a gate agent going out of their way to comfort a stressed traveler, a pilot taking time to explain delays personally, a crew member quietly supporting a colleague through hardship. Michael often visited various hubs, joining early morning briefings and late-night check-ins. He listened more than he spoke, making it clear that leadership was about service, not status. One evening, while deplaning at a small regional airport, Michael overheard two passengers praising the airline staff. "You can really tell they care," one said. "Makes the whole trip better." That simple acknowledgement was proof: the company was changing, not just in policy, but in heart. Yet Michael knew the journey wasn't finished. There would always be challenges, setbacks, and moments that tested the company's resolve. But the foundation was stronger now. Because leadership, he believed, was measured not by the position you hold, but by the respect you earn, and the difference you make. Months turned into a year, and the transformation Michael Bennett set in motion continued to grow, far beyond the immediate aftermath of that single flight. What had started as a moment of conflict became a catalyst for deep, lasting change within the airline's culture. Boardrooms buzzed with new ideas, but more importantly, airport terminals across the country reflected a more thoughtful, respectful atmosphere. Employees at all levels began to embody the company's renewed values in their everyday actions. It wasn't just policy anymore, it was personal. Michael often reflected on that day on Flight 419, the moment he was asked to give up a seat that was rightfully his. It was a painful reminder of how easily standards can slip when no one is watching, and how crucial it is for leadership to step in, not with anger, but with resolve. He understood now that true leadership wasn't about power or prestige. It was about accountability, humility, and setting an example that others could follow. The staff who had been placed on administrative leave had since gone through thorough reviews, coaching, and training. Many returned to their roles with a renewed sense of purpose, others found new paths elsewhere, carrying the lessons with them. One particularly meaningful change was the company's launch of an ongoing diversity and inclusion initiative, not framed as a reaction, but as a commitment to recognizing and valuing every individual's contribution. This initiative was paired with mentorship programs designed to empower employees from all backgrounds and help them advance within the company. Michael also introduced a Respect and Excellence award, given monthly to employees who demonstrated outstanding dedication to the airline's core values. The award quickly became one of the most coveted honors among staff. Outside the company, the airline's reputation soared. Customer satisfaction scores hit record highs. Industry peers took notice, adopting similar approaches. The story of the CEO who turned humiliation into a movement became a case study in leadership seminars worldwide. Yet, despite all the accolades and progress, Michael remained grounded. One afternoon, sitting in a quiet corner of the airport lounge, he received a message from a young flight attendant he'd met during one of his visits: "Thank you for reminding us all that every passenger deserves dignity. Because of you, I feel proud to do this job every day." Reading those words, Michael smiled. This was the true legacy he wanted to leave behind, not just a successful company, but a culture where respect was non-negotiable, and every person mattered. That day on Flight 419 was never just about a seat. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter how small the moment might seem. Because sometimes, the smallest moments can change everything. Though the incident on Flight 419 was now firmly behind the airline, its impact continued to resonate in ways few could have predicted. Michael Bennett understood that changing a company's culture was like steering a massive ship. It took time, persistence, and constant vigilance. The initial wave of reforms had set a new course, but the real work lay in maintaining momentum and deepening those changes across every department. Months after the public attention faded, Michael initiated a series of regional listening tours. He traveled across the country to meet employees face-to-face, in bustling hubs, small regional airports, even in remote stations. At each stop, he held open forums where workers could speak candidly about their experiences, challenges, and hopes for the future. These sessions weren't about formal presentations or rehearsed speeches, they were genuine conversations. One evening in Denver, a young baggage handler shared a story that stuck with Michael. She spoke of a day when a passenger had been upset over lost luggage. A coworker, trained under the new programs, had taken extra time to not only resolve the issue but to personally reassure the traveler, turning a potentially negative experience into a memorable one. "It made me proud," the employee said softly. "Like I'm part of something bigger." Stories like these multiplied. They weren't always headline news, but they built the fabric of the airline's new identity. Back at headquarters, Michael worked closely with his executive team to ensure that these grassroots improvements were reflected in policies, performance reviews, and leadership development. The airline's leadership pipeline began to diversify, not just in demographics but in perspectives and backgrounds. Inclusion became not a box to check, but a source of innovation and strength. One day, while reviewing internal communications, Michael noticed a message thread between employees celebrating a recent service award. Among the comments was one from an intern, barely a year with the company. "I joined this airline because of what I saw happening here. It feels like a place that respects people, for real." Michael felt a quiet satisfaction. The company was not perfect, no organization ever is, but it was evolving in the right direction. As he looked out from his office window, watching planes take off and land, he was reminded that every journey begins with a single step. And sometimes, the most unexpected moments, like a disputed seat on a flight, can spark a movement that transforms not just a company, but the lives of everyone it touches. Because leadership isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about how you respond when they happen. And Michael Bennett had chosen to respond with courage, conviction, and an unwavering commitment to doing better. The story of Flight 419 became more than an anecdote, it became a symbol of the airline's transformation and a guiding principle for its future. At the company's annual summit, Michael stood before thousands of employees, partners, and stakeholders. He reflected on the past year's journey, the challenges faced, the lessons learned, and the victories earned. "This is not just about one flight, one seat, or one incident," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "It's about who we choose to be every day. How we treat each other, our customers, and the communities we serve." He shared stories from employees across the globe, moments of kindness, professionalism, and teamwork that embodied the company's renewed values. Michael closed by reminding everyone that culture is a living thing. It requires care, attention, and courage. We must hold ourselves accountable, not just as individuals, but as a collective. As applause filled the room, Michael felt a deep sense of hope. The path ahead wouldn't always be easy, but the airline was stronger, kinder, and more united. And it all began with a quiet man refusing to give up his seat, standing firmly for respect and dignity. Because in the end, leadership is not about power. It's about purpose.